So this is the beginning of chapter 19. So part 1, we're going to be looking at the blood and the cardiovascular system. And in this first video, we will be talking about the function and also the properties of blood. So most cells, at least in a multicellular organism like humans, are pretty stationary. So they can't really move around themselves, the cells themselves, to like get oxygen or to get nutrients or to move to a different location to eliminate wastes or carbon dioxide. So because of that, these needs are met by two different fluids, by the blood and by the interstitial fluid surrounding of the cells. Now, blood is actually a liquid connective tissue, and it consists of cells surrounded by a liquid extracellular matrix, and then the extracellular matrix is called plasma, and it suspends various cells and cell fragments. Extracellular fluid is the fluid that kind of surrounds the body cells and is constantly being renewed by blood. Now here in this picture, we have a test tube that had blood in it that was centrifuged or spun down. And this is where the cells that are going to be more dense sink to the bottom of the tube. So these are going to be like red blood cells. These are going to sink to the bottom of the tube, while the blood plasma here at the top of the tube, which is a lot less dense, is going to form this layer on top. Now, normally blood is about 45% formed elements and then 55% blood plasma. Now we also have this pale, colorless white blood cells and platelets that are going to occupy less than 1% of these formed elements. And because these are less dense than red blood cells, but more dense than blood plasma, they form this very thin buffy coat. And this is the layer between the very densely packed red blood cells and the plasma in centrifuged blood. So like we just looked at in that centrifuge tube, whole blood actually consists of two elements or two components. So the first one is going to be blood plasma. And this is a very liquidy, watery extracellular matrix that contains dissolved substances. And then the second component is going to be called formed elements. And now formed elements are going to be cells and cell fragments. So the cellular part or the formed elements, these include red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And the plasma, on the other hand, this contains water, proteins, and some other solutes. So when the formed elements are removed from blood, you have you're left with this very yellowy straw-colored liquid that's called blood plasma, or simply plasma in some cases, or they're interchangeable. And blood plasma then is made up of about 91.5% water and about 8.5% solutes, most of which are going to be proteins. Now, some of the proteins in blood plasma are also found in other parts of the body, but the types that are confined to the blood are called plasma proteins. Hepatocytes, which remember are liver cells, these synthesize most of the plasma proteins, which include albumins, which is 54% of plasma proteins, globulins, which is 38%, and fibrinogen. So these are all made by the hepatocytes. Now here on the other side, the formed elements of blood, these include three principal components. These are going to be red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Now the red blood cells, these are also called erythrocytes, which is labeled here actually. So red blood cell is synonymous with erythrocyte, and these transport oxygen from the lungs to body cells, and then vice versa, they deliver carbon dioxide from the body cells back to the lungs to be expelled in the air that you breathe. White blood cells, these are also called leukocytes. And these protect the body from invading pathogens and other foreign substances that may come in. The last component here in the formed elements is going to be platelets. You can see them here as well. So this is the kind of fragments of cells, and they don't have a nucleus. They're just kind of parts of cells. So they do have quite a few functions, these platelets, and we'll talk about these a lot more in later videos. But one major function that they have is that they release chemicals that promote blood clotting when blood vessels are damaged. So major role for platelets is blood clotting. So here in this right picture, you can see most of these are going to be red blood cells. You have a couple platelets floating around there. They're much, much smaller than the red blood cells you can see. And then you have these white blood cells that are huge compared to red blood cells or platelets even. So in this labeled diagram, you also have these words like monocyte and neutrophil. Now these are types of white blood cells or types of leukocytes, and we will go over each of these types of white blood cells in a later video. Now blood has three general functions. First one is transportation. First one's transportation, because blood is going to transport oxygen from the lungs to the cells of the body. And like I said, the other way around as well, but this way we're going to bring carbon dioxide from body cells to the lungs to be expelled in the air you breathe. Blood also carries nutrients from the gastrointestinal tract when you have a meal, and it brings those nutrients to body cells, and hormones from endocrine glands to other body cells. Blood also will transport heat and waste products to various organs around the body for elimination. Secondly, a major function of blood is going to be regulation. So circulating blood really helps to maintain homeostasis of all body fluids. So blood helps to regulate pH through buffers. So buffers are going to be chemicals that convert strong acids or strong bases into weak ones. So buffers really help to maintain a steady pH level instead of very highly fluctuating pH. Blood also helps to adjust body temperature through heat absorbing or heat cooling properties of the water in blood plasma. And also excess heat can be lost from the blood to the environment. And the last function of blood is going to be protection. So third one, protection here. So we all know that blood can clot or become very gel-like. And this clotting factor of blood is going to protect against excessive loss of blood. So this is especially important after an injury. If you cut yourself, you need your blood to clot and to stop that bleeding. Otherwise, you would continue bleeding out if it didn't clot. In addition to the clotting properties, the blood also protects your body by the white blood cells that it holds within it. So white blood cells are going to protect against disease by carrying out phagocytosis. There's also several types of blood proteins, which include antibodies, interferons, and complement proteins, which are all going to help protect against disease in different ways. So transportation, regulation, and protection are going to be the three functions of blood. So here we have this table. It gives kind of a general overview of the substances in blood plasma. So here we have water, plasma proteins, and other solutes. Gives their description and a little bit of their function. So water is going to be the most dominant substance in blood plasma, and it's going to mainly act as a solvent and a heat transporter and absorber. A couple of these other plasma proteins, albumins, really help to maintain osmotic pressure. Globulins, immunoglobulins, are what antibodies are made of, so they help a lot in your immune system. And fibrinogen plays a very, very essential role in blood clotting. So these three major plasma proteins are going to be very important in maintaining homeostasis. And that's going to be the end of Chapter 19, Part 1.